My mom told me I was too ugly to ever find love. She even encouraged my ex to dump me. When she met my wife at a family dinner years later, she couldn't stop staring, because she was everything my mother wished she could be. I grew up believing I was never enough. Not because I was told so by the world, but because my mother made sure I heard it every single day of my life. My name is Liam Carter, and if you asked anyone in my family what kind of person I was growing up, they'd probably say, the quiet one, or the shy one. But my mother, Veronica, had a different description for me. You're not the kind of man women want, Liam. Those words became a soundtrack to my teenage years, echoing through every dinner, every awkward family photo, every failed attempt at confidence. My older brother, Derek, was everything she wanted in a son. Tall, athletic, confident, the kind of guy who could charm anyone within 10 seconds of talking. He was the golden boy, and I was the shadow that followed him around. Mom would say things like, "Why can't you stand like your brother? You hunch too much. You'll never attract anyone with that posture." Or, "Derek has presence. You just blend in." And each comment chipped away at me, one small piece at a time. By the time I turned 20, I had mastered the art of invisibility, speaking softly, avoiding mirrors, and convincing myself that love wasn't meant for people like me. Then I met Sophie. She was the first person who ever saw me, really saw me. We met at a coffee shop near my college. I was working part-time there, trying to save up for tuition, and she was a customer who always ordered a caramel macchiato with extra foam. One day, I accidentally messed up her order and apologized like my life depended on it. Instead of being annoyed, she laughed and said, "Hey, it's just coffee. You look like you needed a smile more than I needed caffeine." That small moment turned into daily conversations, then weekend walks, and eventually, a relationship that felt too good to be true. For the first time, I thought maybe my mother was wrong. Maybe someone could love me for who I was, not for how I looked, or how much money I had. But, of course, that illusion didn't last long. When I introduced Sophie to my mother, I thought maybe she'd see how happy I was. Instead, she gave her a tight smile and said, "Well, she's nice, I suppose." Simple, but nice. The way she said simple stung more than I wanted to admit. Over the next few months, my mother made it her personal mission to sabotage what I had. She'd accidentally tell Sophie that I wasn't doing much with my life, or that I lacked drive. Once, I overheard her saying, "You're a lovely girl, Sophie. But you could do better. My son's sweet, but he's not ambitious. You deserve someone who'll take care of you." When I confronted her about it, she just shrugged. "I'm only being honest, Liam. You don't want to trap her in a future of mediocrity, do you?" I remember standing there, heart pounding, realizing my own mother didn't believe I was worth love. It didn't take long before her poison started working. Sophie began to pull away. She'd cancel dates, avoid eye contact, act distant. I tried to fix things, brought her flowers, wrote her notes, anything, but the warmth in her eyes was gone. One evening, she came over looking pale and nervous. She said we needed to talk. My chest tightened as she said the words that shattered me. "Liam, I think we want different things. I don't think I can do this anymore." I begged her to tell me what went wrong, and after a long pause, she said, "Your mom talked to me. She said I'm holding you back. And maybe she's right." That night, I felt something inside me die. After she left, I went to my mother's house. She opened the door, smiling like nothing was wrong. I asked her, "Did you tell Sophie to leave me?" She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I told her the truth. You'll thank me one day. I'm saving you from disappointment." That was the last conversation we had for years. I packed my things, moved out of the city, and promised myself one thing. I would never let her words define me again. When I left home, I didn't have much, just a few boxes of clothes, an old laptop, and a head full of bitterness. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get as far away from my mother's voice as possible. At first, it was hard, brutally hard. I slept on a friend's couch for a while, then picked up small freelance gigs fixing computers or coding simple websites just to get by. I didn't have a degree, connections, or confidence. But what I did have was anger, raw, unfiltered anger that burned every time I remembered my mother's words. "You'll never be successful. You're not the kind of man women want." And I decided, if she was going to be right about me, it wouldn't be because I didn't try. So I worked. I worked until my fingers cramped, until my eyes stung from staring at the screen. I learned new programming languages online, took free business courses, and built small projects just for practice. Then, one day, a startup reached out to me after seeing one of my projects on a coding forum. They asked if I'd be interested in joining their team. I accepted instantly. It wasn't glamorous, a small group of guys working out of a shared office space, but it was something real. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was mine. Over the next few years, everything started changing. My confidence grew as my skills did. I wasn't just the quiet one anymore, I was the guy who could solve problems no one else could. I started saving money, moved into my own apartment, and even started hitting the gym to clear my mind. It wasn't about revenge at first. It was about survival. But slowly, that survival turned into purpose. Every insult, every backhanded comment from my mother, every look of pity from Sophie, they became fuel. Then, something unexpected happened. At a business seminar in Chicago, I met Amelia. She was giving a presentation on architectural design and innovation, confident, intelligent, and completely magnetic. I remember thinking she was way out of my league. After the talk, we ended up sitting near each other during lunch. She started the conversation, asking about my company. I laughed and said, "Oh, it's not really a company yet, more like a one-man circus with a dream." She smiled and said, "Dreams are where everything worth doing begins." That line stuck with me. Over the next few months, we kept in touch, first through LinkedIn, then texts, then late-night phone calls that went on for hours. I told her everything, my family, my struggles, my failures. And she never once looked down on me. She saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. When we officially started dating, I half expected her to lose interest once she realized I wasn't rich or flashy. But she didn't care about any of that. She cared about me. I remember one night, after a rough week at work, I told her I sometimes still heard my mother's voice in my head, the one that said I wasn't good enough. Amelia took my hand, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Then let me be louder." I'll never forget that. Years passed. My startup grew from a small project to a full-fledged tech firm. We started landing contracts with big clients, hiring staff, expanding offices, and before I knew it, I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. At some point, I realized something incredible. I didn't just rebuild my life, I transformed it. I had a career I loved, a team that respected me, and a woman who loved me unconditionally. One night, while standing on the balcony of the house we just bought overlooking the city, Amelia came up beside me. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You did it, Liam. You became everything they said you couldn't." I looked at her and smiled, because for the first time, I finally believed it too. Little did I know, life had one last twist waiting, one that would bring my past crashing back into my perfect present. It had been 8 years since I last spoke to my mother. 8 years of silence, distance, and peace, something I once thought I'd never have. In those 8 years, I'd built a life that would have made the younger version of me unrecognizable. My company was thriving, Amelia and I had just celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary, and for the first time ever, I felt whole. Then one evening, out of nowhere, I got a phone call from my brother, Derek. I hadn't heard his voice in years either. But it still had that same overconfident tone, the kind that always made me feel small when we were younger. "Hey, little bro," he said. "Long time no talk. Listen, Mom's hosting a family dinner next weekend. She really wants you to come. Says it's been too long." I almost laughed. 8 years of silence, and now suddenly she wanted to see me? I asked, "Why now?" Derek sighed. "I don't know, man. She's getting older, maybe trying to make amends. Look, I think it'd mean a lot to her, and to me." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hang up and forget the call ever happened. But another part, the stronger one, whispered, "Maybe it's time." That night, I told Amelia about it while we were having dinner. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. "You don't owe her forgiveness, Liam. But maybe you owe yourself closure." She was right. So I agreed to go. The following weekend, Amelia and I pulled up to my mother's house, a place I hadn't seen since I was in my 20s. It looked the same, maybe a little smaller than I remembered. Funny how that happens when you grow up. As we walked up the front steps, I felt a flicker of anxiety, not because I feared my mother anymore, but because I was about to face the ghost she created. When I rang the bell, the door opened almost instantly. There she was, Veronica Carter, perfectly made up as always, her smile tight and rehearsed. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then her eyes shifted to Amelia, and that was when I saw it, the flash of envy before she masked it with politeness. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You look different." "Better, I hope," I said with a small smile. "Much better," she replied quickly, glancing at Amelia again. "And who is this lovely woman?" Amelia extended her hand with her usual warmth. "I'm Amelia. It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Carter." My mother's eyes scanned her, from her elegant dress to her wedding ring, and for a moment, she looked like someone who just realized she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Inside, the dinner table was already set. My brother Derek was there, along with his wife, Monica, who gave me a genuine hug. Derek greeted me with his trademark grin, though I could tell he was surprised too. The evening started off tense but polite. My mother tried to steer the conversation toward safe topics, the weather, Derek's job, neighborhood gossip. But her curiosity kept pulling her back to Amelia. "So, Amelia," she asked sweetly. "What do you do for work?" "I'm an architect," Amelia replied. "I run a design firm in the city. We recently partnered with Liam's company for a sustainability project." My mother blinked. "Oh, so, you work together?" "Sometimes," Amelia smiled. "He's my favorite business partner." Everyone chuckled, except my mother. She just nodded, her smile twitching. I could see her mind spinning, recalibrating. The boy she once mocked for being unattractive and unambitious was now sitting across from her, successful, confident, and married to a woman who radiated everything my mother admired and envied. Dinner continued, and the more Amelia spoke, the quieter my mother became. She couldn't stop looking between us, like she was trying to understand how the son she dismissed turned into someone she couldn't belittle anymore. At one point, Derek asked, "So, Liam, what's new with your company?" "Mom mentioned you were doing something in tech, but she wasn't sure what exactly." I smirked slightly. "Well, we recently hit our 10-year milestone. We're expanding internationally next year. It's been a wild ride." Monica gasped. "That's incredible. You never told us that, Veronica." My mother forced a laugh. "Oh, well, you know me. I don't keep up with all that tech stuff." But I knew what it really was, she didn't want to keep up. Because acknowledging my success meant admitting she was wrong. And for my mother, being wrong was worse than being cruel. As the night went on, I could feel the power dynamic shifting. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the awkward boy sitting quietly at the corner of the table. I was the man at the head of it, calm, grounded, and unapologetically myself. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word to prove it. Dinner carried on, but by that point, everyone could feel the change in the air. The conversation had gone from casual small talk to something heavier, a quiet tension that lingered beneath every clink of cutlery and every forced laugh. My mother kept stealing glances at Amelia. It was subtle at first, the kind of side-eye you might give a woman wearing a dress you wish you'd bought, but soon it became obvious. She couldn't stop staring. It wasn't just admiration. It was envy. Because Amelia embodied everything my mother pretended to value: beauty, elegance, class, except Amelia had something my mother never did: kindness. Finally, my brother Derek tried to lighten the mood. "So, Liam, I heard you've been doing big things in the tech world. Mom said you're, running your own company now?" I smiled politely. "That's right. We started small, but it's grown a lot over the years. We just opened offices in London and Toronto last quarter." The table went quiet. Even Derek, the golden child, looked impressed. "Wow, that's huge, man." My mother gave a tight smile, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," she said. "So proud of you." I almost laughed at how forced it sounded. This was the same woman who once told me I'd never be successful because I lacked charisma. But Amelia, being the graceful soul she is, jumped in with her usual warmth. "He's being modest," she said, smiling at me. "Liam's company employs over 100 people now. He's changed so many lives, including mine." The room went completely silent. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Then, in a voice that wavered between surprise and disbelief, she said, "I'm just shocked, that's all. I mean. She gave a nervous laugh. I'm shocked you managed to find someone like her. And there it was. The old Veronica, unable to hide her true self even behind a mask of politeness. Amelia's expression didn't change. She stayed perfectly composed, looking my mother right in the eye. You shouldn't be shocked, Mrs. Carter, she said softly but firmly. Liam is one of the kindest, most brilliant men I've ever met. I'm the lucky one. The entire table went quiet. Even Derek looked uncomfortable. My mother's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. It was as if she was seeing me for the first time, not as the son she criticized or controlled, but as a man who no longer needed her approval. For the rest of dinner, she barely spoke. She smiled mechanically, nodded along to Derek's stories, and avoided my eyes completely. When dessert was served, I excused myself to step out onto the back porch for some air. Amelia followed a few minutes later, slipping her hand into mine. You handled that well, she said softly. I chuckled. I didn't even say anything. Exactly, she smiled. Sometimes silence says everything. We stood there in the cool night air, the sound of distant crickets filling the silence. Through the window, I could see my mother still sitting at the table, staring blankly at her untouched slice of pie. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt pity. Because she finally understood something she'd spent my entire life denying, that love, success, and happiness don't come from control or appearances. They come from growth. From empathy. From learning to be better than the pain that shaped you. When we went back inside, my mother looked up at me. Her voice was small when she said, You really proved me wrong, didn't you? I smiled gently. I didn't do it to prove you wrong, Mom. I did it to prove to myself that I could. And just like that, for the first time ever, she didn't have a comeback. After dessert, the night started winding down. Derek and his wife said their goodbyes first, leaving my mother, Amelia, and me alone in the dining room. The silence was thick, the kind that feels like it has weight. My mother sat at the table, twisting her napkin between her fingers. For the first time in my life, she didn't look composed or in control. She looked small. Finally, she said quietly. You look happy, Liam. I nodded. I am. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. I never thought I'd see you like this. Confident. Successful. Loved. There was a pause, long, heavy. Then she added. I guess I was too hard on you. I thought, if I pushed you, maybe you'd become someone strong. I didn't realize I was just breaking you. Her words hung in the air. For years, I dreamed of hearing an apology from her. But standing there, I realized, it didn't make me feel the way I thought it would. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I took a deep breath and said, You didn't make me strong, Mom. Life did. The people who believed in me did. She did. I looked toward Amelia, who smiled gently at me, the kind of smile that said you're home. My mother's tears fell then, quietly. She reached out as if to touch my hand, but stopped halfway, unsure if she had that right anymore. I just wanted the best for you, she whispered. No, I said softly. You wanted the best version of your expectations. You never wanted the real me. She didn't deny it. She just looked down, defeated. After a long silence, I stood and said, I hope one day you learn to love yourself the way I finally learned to love me. And with that, Amelia and I left. Outside, the air was cool and clear. We walked to the car hand in hand, and as soon as we were inside, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, the kind I'd been carrying for years. Amelia turned to me and said, You know, you didn't need to say much in there. Just being who you are now, that was enough. I smiled. She spent her whole life trying to convince me I was worthless. I guess the best revenge was proving her wrong, not with words, but with peace. She leaned her head on my shoulder as we drove away from that old house, the house that once held every ounce of pain I'd ever felt. And for the first time, it was just a building. Nothing more. Months later, I got a letter from my mother. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. She said she was proud of me. That she'd started therapy. That maybe, one day, we could start again. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know if I ever would. But I did smile. Because whether or not she changed, I already had. That night, as I sat with Amelia on our balcony, overlooking the city lights, I thought about the scared boy I used to be, the one who thought he was too ugly, too quiet, too unworthy to be loved. He didn't die. He just grew up. And he learned that sometimes, the people who try to dim your light are only afraid of their own shadows. My mother once told me I'd never find love or success. Turns out, all I needed was to stop believing her.